What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
By the way, that was sung by a guy. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Now, how did he get up there?
I don't know.
How did I just get up there?
He was a little kid at the time.
I know, but I was straining.
It was before his voice changed.
Well, you know, John, I'm Larry Rifkin. That's John Kropsic. This is America Trends. And we have talked about loneliness in the past, John. In fact, I went into a corner when I did it, and I said, I can't be with you. I need to think about loneliness. I have to experience loneliness.
There you go. But it's bad for your health.
Well, we did determine that, particularly about older men, that many of us get very isolated. We don't have the social networks that our wives have, and we kind of wall ourselves off, and we say, oh, here's my friend Netflix, my friend Hulu, and, you don't want to take calls. You don't really want to talk to your old buddies anymore. You think, oh, I'm graying out of my life, and I'm not happy with myself.
Well, that Netflix is ruining the millennials, too. So.
Well, we did study that in another podcast. But, John, what I think is really interesting about this particular podcast is that we have our old friend, Dr. John Huber, back with us. He is the chairman for Maninstream Mental Health, a nonprofit organization that brings lasting and positive change to the lives of individuals. And he's warning us again. He's got the big red alert.
Alert.
And he calls it phoneliness. A phone addiction.
Alone with your phone.
Alone with your phone. Alone at home with my phone. But what he's saying is that this is something that is afflicting not just older guys. This is afflicting many in the millennial generation. And that is also reinforced by a study that was done by CIGNA, a company that has its headquarters right here where we are in the state of Connecticut.
I think it's an addiction. I think a lot of people are just, you see them. In fact, I was just at jury duty, and so many of the young people, I mean, their heads are in that phone, and they don't move. They don't talk. I mean,
and they really don't want to do the things that connect them to their friends. In fact, a friend might be across the room. They'd rather text them than talk to them. Well, the new CIGNA study that we and Dr. Huber discussed reveals that loneliness is at epidemic levels in America. And the most surprising is how much it's affecting people in that younger tier. And so we talk about various of those generations, Generation X, the millennials, and the impact that all of this is having and the way we address it. And many times there's a manifestation of loneliness we see in sleeping, physical activity, spending time with our family. I mean, we really just disengage from a lot of the things that have in the past identified us as being active, vibrant human beings.
Well, they've designed these things to be that way because they send you that dopamine whatever.
Rush.
The rush, that's it.
Waiting for a like or a click or something.
So, I mean, they know this is going on. They've studied this, so that this is part of the problem. People got to break away.
And by the way, we're talking about millennials, we're talking about Generation X, but surprising to me in all of this is that Generation Z, these are adults 18 to 22, they are the loneliest generation, and they have worse health than many of the older generations.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, why don't we dig into all of this? I mean, John, it's rather disturbing. I mean, it really is. 1 in 4 Americans rarely or never feels as though there are people who really understand them. We have 2 in 5 Americans who sometimes or always feel their relationships are not meaningful. I mean, this is really a problem in our society.
There's only so many words you can make with Z.
Oh, well, are we going to try to do that? How about X? Can you make any words from X?
Yeah, X has got a problem, too.
Xerox. They never did anything original anyway. All right, John, let's go and talk about loneliness, phoneliness with Dr. John Huber. He kept us company here on America Trends. Dr. John Huber is with us on America Trends. He's the chairman for Maninstream Mental Health, a nonprofit organization that brings lasting and positive change to the lives of individuals who suffer from mental health issues. And we call upon you regularly, Dr. Huber, to help us through this. And I'm noticing, we're here in Connecticut, that from Bloomfield, Connecticut, CIGNA, an insurance company based here in Connecticut, has a new national survey exploring the impact of loneliness in the United States. The surprising results in this study suggest that it's not only those of us of a certain age, but a lot of young people are very lonely.
That's exactly true. I mean, we have natural attrition with, as we get older, our friends get sick and, or they move on and we start feeling isolated that way. So traditionally, we don't see that in the younger crowds, the younger generations, but we're starting to see it now. And I think there's several reasons why that may be happening.
Well, help us through that.
These young people, when I go in, for example, to assess somebody because they're having problems in school, one of the things I have to do is get them and make observations of them in different arenas of their life. So I like to see them doing social things. So on high school campuses, for example, the cafeteria traditionally is a very social place. It's usually one of the loudest places on the campus. And I go there now, and it's not the loudest place on campus. They're sitting next to their friends, but they're not making eye contact with them. They're texting them and occasionally blurting something out at them across the table, but no real in-depth conversation. And what we're seeing is these young children, they're not learning how to make personal one-on-one contact and connections, and that's affecting the younger generations, the college-age kids right now having hard times making committed relationships because they haven't struggled with best friend issues to learn how to be committed with another adult. We're seeing some interesting trends in lower numbers of teenage unwanted pregnancies, lower number of teenage sexually transmitted infections. But when they get over the age of 18, what we see is they go back to their social media and they use apps like Tinder where they go on there and they're having hookups. So all of a sudden the pregnancy rates and the sexually transmission rates jump right back up. But there's no human connection with the people that they're having these hookups with. And it's an empty life.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, when we think about it, when we go back to de Tocqueville, when he came and looked at the American experiment many years ago, and he saw us all as joiners, that we were people who loved to associate with one another. And you look at it, this phenomenon that I really caught up to, I think with the book by Robert Putnam years ago called Bowling Alone. And today it seems like everybody's bowling alone. I mean, listen to this, Dr. Huber, and this won't surprise you, but I'd love your amplification of what's going on here and your great observational skills. Nearly half of Americans report sometimes or always feeling alone. Half.
I think that's a legitimate and maybe even somewhat of an underestimate of what's really going on out there. I see lots of people that are living with people and they're isolating themselves. They may be in the same room, the same building, but they're not having a relationship with the people that are near them. And it's a pretty scary thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the ease of electronics today. They are substituting, but it's much like having a diet soda and you get the sweetness, but there's none of the nutritional value of as if there was a lot in a regular soda.
Yeah, well, that may not be the best example, but you call
exactly.
You call it phoneliness.
Yes, and because their phones are taking them away, and they feel isolated and lonely, but then they get a text message or they get a response on Facebook or Instagram, and they get a little bitty bump of dopamine, much like someone who's taking heroin or cocaine. And they feel good for an instant, so that keeps them going back to the phone instead of what they need to do is they need to put their phone down and go look somebody straight in the face and do face-to-face activities. So it's a struggle. I have teenage kids, and if they're going to be on the phone, if they're going to be on video games, they owe me. It costs them activity time. They are both physically active. My son's a second-degree black belt now. I make them trade me activities that require them to use both hands, or basically makes it impossible for them to use their electronics while they're doing them. And there's a few activities that I just say, hey, why don't we go do this? And that they've fallen in love with. In fact, they invite lots of their friends. And that one of them, for example, is we go fishing. And the other one is we go out to the country and we do target practice. We have wild feral hogs out there, and we hunt those guys down. And it's amazing how I was able to get, at the time, a 10 and 13-year-old to, jump up and let's go and drag a couple of their friends with us every time we leave. And they still do it to this day. Now they're, my youngest is 13 now, so it's been for the last 3 years. And it has done so much for my kids' ability to communicate and their friends' ability to communicate, because now they come over and they actually take time. They shake our hands. They look at us in the eye when they're talking to us. They don't just kind of walk around with their head down and, whatever. And
well, the president of CIGNA, said this, and I'm sure you will agree with this. We view a person's physical, mental, and social health as being entirely connected. You just did that in connecting, getting out into real-world experiences and really enjoying lots of the fruits of nature and the like, and not just this isolation chamber that we call social media.
That's exactly right. And I can tell you that I agree with the CEO there of CIGNA. In fact, CIGNA has been, for me, for the past probably 7 years, probably the best provider. When I have patients who need therapy, they're like, hey, give it to them. Just give it to them. You think they need 3 times a week? Give it to them. They don't harass me about, oh, well, we're only going to approve 12 sessions. No, they're like, get help for this person. And, they've been so supportive of my patients. Of all the insurance companies, they're like the one that doesn't give me a hard time when I say I need more sessions.
Well, I'll be at their door looking for sponsorship of this podcast within hours. But no, let me ask you, only around half of Americans, they say in their study, have meaningful in-person social interactions, such as having an extended conversation with a friend or spending quality time with family on a daily basis. So we really are not connecting. Even if people are within our immediate vicinity, we may be there, but we're not really there.
And that is exactly right. It's too easy to be distracted. And, I talk to people, I talk to patients, I talk to doctors I work with, and they all talk about having that sit-down dinner, and what do I get? Oh, we turn our cell phones upside down on the table. And I'm like, turn them off. Isn't that person across the table important enough for you to turn it off for the 35 or 40 minutes you're eating? You're sending them this bad message that, oh, I'm here, but if the phone rings, it's probably more important than you. So, that doesn't help that relationship.
Well, we often talk about the millennials, we talk about the baby boomers, sometimes Generation X. But here's another generation, and tell us what you're seeing in them. You began to discuss them. We're talking about Generation Z. And this study says that these folks, 18 to 22, are the loneliest generation, and claims to be in worse health than even older generations.
Well, 20% are attempting suicide. They're not all of them successful, but 20, that's 1 out of 5 are attempting suicide in that age range right now. It is pandemic. It is a horrible thing. And when everybody in society has too much stigma against mental health, they're not going to get help. And then when we come in and say, this is what needs to happen, put your phone down, charge it in the living room and have it on the charger by 8 o'clock every night. They don't. I can't do that. I can't do that. We could blame it all on the cell phones and electronics. I can say a lot about that. One of them is the people who design the software are geniuses. They know how to control human behavior, and it's wonderful that they can do that. But you're talking about people whose brains have still not matured enough to be able to set limits on pleasurable things, and they're being driven completely by what Freud used to call the id, the instant gratification side, and they never learn to turn that phone off. So other adults, parents, uncles, teachers, professors, need to step up to the plate at this point because they're not able to do it.
Dr. Huber, some time back we had a conversation about social isolation among older men, that a lot of our social networks break down once we leave work. And we've seen a lot of movies, Jack Nicholson, kind of in a van alone and so forth. And guys seem to be unable to connect. Women with their book clubs and their, well, is that a wine club that acts as a book club? I don't know, but whatever it is. But they seem to be better at this than we are. Is that correct?
Well, again, it goes back to those communication skills. And if you think traditionally in America, boys got trucks and balls when they were infants, right? And girls got stuffed animals. So before they could even talk, they were learning nonverbal communication, women were, and guys were learning how to grunt and make truck sounds. So we never got the drill and practice that most women got with the nonverbals. So when we lose our core relationships, our best friends, the people we know from high school, now we're pushing 70 and they're dropping off. And it's very difficult for us to go and find new people to replace those. And, it's a talent. You have to work at it. It's not something that you can just go walk into a crowd and all of a sudden you have a new best friend.
But I remember a previous Surgeon General here in the U.S. said that this, not cancer, not heart disease, social isolation is the most vexing and dangerous of all the illnesses because it brings on so many other things.
It brings on the heart disease. It brings on the cancer, and it brings on, oh, well, I have nothing to live for, so why should I try? Why should I listen to my doctor and stop smoking? Why should I stop drinking? Why should I, put away the fried chicken? It's the only thing that gives me pleasure right now. And I see it. In fact, I just had one of those conversations with one of my patients today. It's like you have COPD, yet you walk outside and smoke 3 times a day. And we've got you on oxygen. We're talking about trying to, the only hope you have at this point is a lung transplant, yet you're outside smoking a cigarette 3 times a day.
When we look at Americans and we look at them as adults and we say, wow, they seem somewhat put together. But there are so many people who are walking around with a lot of trauma. And we were looking at a book by Johann Hari that looked at addiction and the underlying causes, and then looked at some of the problems related to depression. And what he found underlying all of this was a lot of hidden trauma, that in fact, if you give opioids to certain people, they won't get addicted. You give them to other people, they will, because really
Yes.
that is just a substitute for trying to find relief from a pain that won't go away. Help us with that.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Most of the patients that I work with that have addictions, they're using that chemical stimulant to replace something they lost at an earlier time in their life. And, it's really interesting because we talk about 12-step programs and like that, and it all has to do with the person with the addiction changing their behavior, but it's not really going after the underlying cause. And there's new research now with things like ketamine where they go in and it's able to actually restructure some of the neurochemical pathways and fix that cause. Now, that event happened to somebody however many years ago, maybe decades ago, but they're still trying to fix it. And if we can create a new pathway that kind of bypasses that need, then they can walk away from something like alcohol or heroin. And once the physical effects of that drug are gone, actually.
I find that so interesting and possibly so hopeful for the future if we begin to restructure some of these rehabilitation programs to really focus on how do we get you back to engagement and believing that other people are really the answer to the issue that you're facing.
Well, and that's the vexing problem right there. I mean, we see how many people do you know that say, I don't really like people, I like my dogs much better. And I read stories all the time about people who skip out on dinner engagements to spend time with their dogs because they really don't want to spend time with other human beings. If we got people to a place where they actually enjoy being with other human beings and they can benefit and grow from that relationship, because there are so many positive connections you can make with other human beings, and it can be so rewarding and so just nurturing to you to have a good, solid, close relationship with another human being that, yeah, the dogs are there. They're like the icing on the cake then. And I don't want you to walk away from your dogs, but I think we need to relearn how to be human again.
Interestingly, the survey that we have been feeding off of during this conversation that was done by CIGNA also revealed exactly what you said, that we are very social by nature as humans, and it's so important to have communities. How much has the suburban solution that so many people have bought into affected where we are? Because we put ourselves on a 1-acre plot of land and we kind of wall ourselves off.
Well, we do wall ourselves off. I think it's made some of the situations more contrasting. In other words, that they've gotten worse. When you lived a mile away from somebody or from town, you had to actually put effort into going and seeing somebody. And so that effort made that even that much more valuable to you. When it's right around the corner, it's not very valuable to you. And now with things like Skype and Instagram and Snapchat, it's even worth less because it's not even, I don't even have to get out of bed. I just have to turn my phone over and push a button.
What about urbanization? We see where a lot of young people, and maybe this contradicts some of what the survey tells us, they're living in these very close-in urban settings, and but are they just kind of still doing what the social media allows them? Even though they may be in close proximity, they're still not getting out of their apartment or off their couch, even if somebody's in the next room or the next apartment.
That's where the tragedy is, because they are so close to the fix, to the answer to their isolation, yet they stay attached to those electronics. And they're talking about, we've already seen the glasses where you get to see basically your screen from your phone on your glasses. And, I've talked to some AI people who are talking about some basic, simple type implants, so that, you're getting sound transmission into your ear through bones and, all this crazy stuff that's just going to envelop us even more. And before long, we'll all be Borgs and just be doing whatever the apps tell us to do.
We'll return to this episode of America Trends in just a moment. If you like what we're doing here at America Trends Podcast, please don't keep it to yourself. I know there are a lot of people, John, who think, well, if I'm listening and somebody else wants to listen at the same time, maybe we're going to collide and they're not going to be able to hear us. Yeah. Is that the way the technology works?
No, there's plenty of bandwidth. Everybody can listen at the same time.
All right. Well, that dispels that myth. Now, you can do a number of things that would really be helpful to us. You could give us a kind rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, and that boosts what they consider to be our value and visibility. And what does that do, John?
Well, that puts us in the forefront so that you can find us easier, and most important is other people can find us easier.
And you can subscribe there or on our site, americatrendspodcast.com, or wherever you're listening, so we can alert you to new episodes of the podcast, which, by the way, we put out twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or you can like us on Facebook or follow us where, John?
On Twitter.
On Twitter, that's right, where the world turns to hear fake news or whatever it is. Well, you can direct message us at Trends Podcast or using hashtag Trends Podcast. And John, with our growing audience, and really it's been pretty remarkable, a lot of people just came to us the last month or two, and they might have missed earlier episodes. Can they get them again?
They can look through them and pick the ones they want to listen to. They're all on the website, and a lot of them are up on iTunes, many of them.
All right. Well, listen, there's lots of material to listen to. We hope you have the time, and we'll lend it to us because we try to make it worth your while. And thanks so much for listening.
And tell your friends.
We now return to this episode of America Trends. Now, you have been focused on another study published in Neuroregulation from San Francisco State University, and that argues that overuse of smartphones is just like any other type of substance abuse. So are we looking at people who, again, may have been trying to get away from something, and the fact that maybe some of the relationships they had in childhood were harmful to them. So now they're looking at these faux relationships and these cyber relationships as being less painful in terms of what the outcomes could be of their social interaction.
That's exactly what's happening, and the neurochemistry involved in this is the exact same neurochemistry that makes somebody crave heroin or cocaine. You're getting these dopamine drips every time you have that social interaction with somebody on a cell phone or a tablet. The difference is that there's no emotional nutrition in there. There's not that feeling. You know, when you think about when you were a kid and you were stuck in class all day, and then you walk out in the hallway and here comes your best friend and that smile you see down the hall, and, you know, whether you bump knuckles or shake hands or hug them or whatever it is, all of that interpersonal interaction is what we as social animals thrive off of. It helps us grow and get stronger. It strengthens our immune system. It's amazing how that works. Well, with the phone apps, you're getting the little dopamine drip from that smile you got down the hall, but everything else is gone. So,
you know, I took a course in mental health first aid because just like people who know how to do CPR, there are so many people walking around today who really have so much emotional baggage, if you will. I mean, what is it that we're looking at here in terms of our society and its mental health? As somebody who works in this field, what would you suggest we're really looking at here as an epidemic?
You know, that isolation, I think we're really looking at a big depressed society right now. And it manifests itself in things that are socially acceptable. Oh, I've got to go and check my Facebook page. Or men, the one emotion we're allowed to express is anger. That person made me so mad today and blah, 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 and you just rant and rave. And that's really your inner child in there that's depressed, and you can't admit that you need to talk to somebody about your depression, so you're going to blow up at everybody and everything's going to make you mad. And then the other one is anxiety. It's socially acceptable to have anxiety because we've all had it. You know, that first time you stand up in front of a crowd, the first time you have that piano recital, everybody knows what anxiety is like, and we all know we've experienced it, so we don't look at it as being, you know, something incapacitating, but it can be. It's also a way that we express depression and that lonely isolation. Oh, I'm so anxious I can't go outside because what if my friends aren't there and they're not going to smile at me, or if they ignore me? Well, you're ignoring them by being on your phone. It's a two-way street, killing our interpersonal relationships, which makes up our community and our socialization in this country. And it's shutting down the key thing, communication. And that's what our basic democracy is based off of, is unfettered communication, where you can say what you want and I can say what I want. And now everything, oh, I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm offended, so you're hurting me, so you have to stop talking about that.
So do some of the political divides contribute to some of the psychological problems that we're experiencing, because we don't even want to open up a conversation with someone simply because if we disagree, it may be a vehement disagreement?
Well, and I think it's close. You're very close, but I think it's that fear that's making the political divide, because you don't know how to deal with that emotional pressure and stress. So you just immediately put up this wall and you won't listen to the other people at all.
Interesting. In this CIGNA study, and I'll close on this, they say that getting the right balance of sleep, work, socializing with friends, family, and me time is connected to lower loneliness scores. Now, I'm reading where nobody's getting the right amount of sleep, where people hate their work, hate their jobs in numbers that are staggering. We're not socializing with friends unless it's by way of social media. And family, I mean, we're all in dispute about everything. So how do we begin to get this back in balance?
Well, you have to step away and start engaging in activities that make it very difficult, if not completely impossible, to be on your computer, be on your tablet, be on your phone. Being really active in sports. How many people do you see playing pickup games of baseball and football and basketball anymore on the streets? It's virtually disappeared in our communities because they're on tablets, they're on Xbox, they're on PlayStation, and they can hit a home run on PlayStation, but they can't in real life, so why would they want to go do that?
Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being with us once again on America Trends. We have turned to Dr. John Huber to help us through this maze, if you will, of mental health issues that are affecting Americans, and particularly loneliness has been our topic today. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.